Want to be here? You need this here. Here. All right. Yeah, testing, a little closer maybe. There. All right. Perfect. That's good. Okay. It's not in the way of, it's clear of this. Okay. Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, is this in front of my face? No. Okay. All right. What do you know? All right. So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I am sitting down because some of you may remember I got a concussion a while ago, and I've had a very busy week. So I'm going to just take advantage of not putting all my energy into standing up and instead put it into being able to speak to all of you on this wonderful theme, imagining the good. Of course, I'm the fifth speaker on imagining the good. So there's a lot that's already been said. I will recap it for those of you who may not have been here for every single Sunday. But I wanted to start with an experience that I just had a couple of months ago that was a spiritual experience. One of the things I love about the way we do Unity here in Missoula is we share our spiritual journeys with each other. And I didn't know that this was going to be a spiritual journey, but it turned out to be an incredible experience. So let me just share it with you. So we went down to Texas to see the eclipse, figured out it had the best percentage chance of not having any clouds. There were no clouds in all the areas that had real high percentages of clouds normally, but Texas was clouded in. But anyway, we also decided to tour New Mexico. So the rest of the trip was fantastic. But the highlight of the trip for me was we had an opportunity to tour Chaco Canyon. Chaco Canyon is the ancient Pueblo people's ceremonial site that was built between 800 and 1200 AD. So it was sort of in the Four Corners area, up in that area of New Mexico. And we arranged ahead of time to have a native Navajo guide. So when we got there, it turns out there were only 6 of us on the tour, not including the guide. And 4 of the 6 of us were together in a party. So they went in their car. And we had the great honor of taking the guide with us in our car, driving between the different places and getting out and walking around and looking at the various sites that are part of this immensely important spiritual center for ancient Pueblo people. So we got there and got to the parking lot of the visitors center, and he wasn't there yet. His name was Gilbert. So we went in and looked around a little bit, came back out, and I said to myself, I need to find Gilbert. So I look across the parking lot, and here walking toward me is this not real tall, just this nice, gentle looking Navajo young man, probably, I say young, he was probably in his 30s. For all of us now, that's young. Anyway, he had a long flowing curly hair. He had on a hat, turquoise shirt, this beautiful, beautiful beaded turquoise necklace with lots of things hanging down, and jeans and something or other. The rest of it isn't that important. But anyway, he said to me, "Are you Nancy?" And I said, "Are you Gilbert?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And we came across the parking lot to shake hands. I don't know how many of you have ever had the experience of shaking someone's hand and realizing that there is an energy there, an absolutely incredible, amazing energy that is not one you normally encounter, shaking somebody's hand. His handshake was all-encompassing, but very, very gentle. And of course, I'm a big believer in women not shaking hands hard enough. So I always set off to really squeeze those hands whenever I shake anybody's hand, because I want them to know I'm not one of those flim-flam women who don't believe in strong handshakes, especially when I'm shaking hands with a man. But I didn't do that this time. I instantly said to myself, oh, wait a minute, this is a whole different kettle of fish here. So I just very gently returned the pressure on his hand. We went on and spent 4.5 hours together. just a very wonderful unfolding of not only what happened back in Chaco then, but what it's like to be a Navajo society now. One of the things that I learned is that you may have heard of this site as being an Anastasi site. Anastasi was a name created by an archaeologist for the people he thought lived there. It means enemies. Subsequent archaeological information has revealed that they are not enemies, that they were trading people. So talking about imagination, coloring your interpretation of the world, that Anastasi name is incorrect for what it is that happened in that place. So we spent this wonderful time together. We would all, 6 of us would be together following him around, and then we get in the car and go places and then follow him around. But he also told us a lot about Navajo life now. The interesting thing about the Navajo is that they were not ever, and I could never think of the right word to use, so you can think of whatever the word is, but the Catholic Church did not come in and take over the Navajo Nation. It did all the other Pueblo people for the most part, but it did not do that with the Navajo. So he is a 20th century, 21st century living embodiment of this long heritage, unbroken heritage of indigenous faith practices. Their faith practice is one that revolves around the concept that they arrived here from Mother Earth by emerging from a hole in the ground that is Mother Earth's navel. And they all came out and they were here, and they're here on a journey. And this is one of the levels they're all progressing through. And at some point, this level will no longer be where they need to be, and they'll progress on to another level as a people. But Mother Earth, the very strong sense of being protected and being part of everything around you, and everything around you being part of you, very strong belief in their faith system. So when we finished the whole tour, it was time to leave. We were back in the parking lot. And all of you know, most of you know, maybe all of you, or most of you have experienced this, I am a 3-breath hugger. And I just felt to myself, I just want to give this young man a hug. So I went up to him very, very, very respectfully. I said, do you hug? And he said, yes, I do. I said, good. I am a 3-breath hugger. Would you do a 3-breath hug with me? And he said he would. So we did a 3-breath hug. And then he said, okay, thank you. I need to go say goodbye to those other people, but I'll be back in a minute. So he did. He went off. He did it. Said goodbye to the other 4, came back to where I was and said, could we do that again? And I said, yes.
Oh.
So we did. And when we finished our second 3-breath hug, he looked at me and he said, we are all one.
Mm.
And I just, well, you can see, it was a very deeply touching moment, because this is just, we'd known each other for 4.5 hours, and yeah. So spiritual journeys, imaginings, being open to letting your imagination take in what's all around you. We've been hearing a lot about imagination. Linda told us something that I did not know. That is that Charles Fillmore actually thought imagination was the first and most important of the 12 powers. And why is that so? Well, it's so because of a quote that Roger found for us. Roger found a quote that goes like this. This is a quote from Charles Fillmore. God is power. Man is powerful. God is the indescribable reservoir of energy that manifests no potentiality whatsoever until set in motion through the consciousness of man. God is, in other words, undifferentiated power that comes into this world in only one way, and that is through us. That is why our imaginations are so powerful, because our imaginations are what give us the ideas that we then use that power to manifest. Susan mentioned that everything in the manifest world has its beginning in thought, in the minds of a human being. And I just always think to myself, you know, when we think about what was present at the time that Jesus lived, and think about what is present now and just in the material world, all of the stuff that we've come up with as a human nature and humankind, the inventions and the technology, all that stuff, all came from the imagination of someone's mind. It is the origin of everything. Imagination creates images for us. If we start imagining from a place of fear, then fear will feed that imagination with all kinds of things that are not true. Things that reflect separation and fear. If we imagine from our positive divine consciousness, imagination creates images of good. If we think about the good and see the good, we manifest the good. Louise told us a couple of wonderful stories, but one of the parts that I liked the best was the quote you heard from your massage therapist or someone who said, we must imagine from a place of spiritual integrity. Yes, we must. And of course, J.K. Rowling, as Louise told us, had this wonderful statement: we do not need magic to change the world. We have all the power we need inside of us. We can imagine better. We can imagine better. And Mike mentioned, of course, that imagination is a double-edged sword, and we can be using it for good or for bad. And we need to learn to direct it, control it, and as Susan said, be mindful of our choices, of how we use our imaginations. So I want to talk today about 3 ways that we can use our imaginations. We can imagine better. And the 3 ways I want to talk about are at 3 different levels. I want to talk about how we can imagine better the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and who we are. I want to talk a little bit about the stories that we tell ourselves about others and how we can do a better job of doing that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the stories that we tell ourselves about the world and how we can do a better job of that. So just for a moment, to think about the role of imagination. We are here in this present moment. But everything that happened in the past, we summon through our imagination. Everything that we envision for the future, we summon through our imagination. And even sometimes right here in the present, we can imagine things that affect what's happening in this current moment. I'm thinking about a time when I was very small and was staying with my cousins who were all older than I was. They wanted to watch Frankenstein. So we watched Frankenstein, and I was maybe 4. Mistake, not a good thing for a 4-year-old to watch Frankenstein. This is the old black and white version. Then they put me to bed in this room that had a hook on the back of the door, and there was a bunch of stuff hanging on the back of the door. And my imagination spent the whole night thinking, oh man, that was Frankenstein right there in my room, you know, right by the foot of my bed. So yeah, imagination can do a lot of interesting things. But anyway, how to do this better? So let's talk about the stories we tell ourselves. They come from our imagination. And as Jeff said a while back, we need to stop imagining ourselves as being less than. We need to start imagining ourselves as being in that wonderful quote about how we are greater than we think we are, from Marianne Williams. That's where we need our imaginations to go. But you know, it struck me after this experience that I had with this Navajo young man. It struck me about, okay, so what is the story I tell myself about my creation story? What is my creation story? Well, as Roger mentioned, he and I are both former Lutherans. I don't call them Lutherans, I call them Lutherans. We're both former Lutherans. And of course, the background story that we have, and of course, is very similar to some for many of you, is the whole getting thrown out of Eden story, you know? Oops. But there we were living in this wonderful place, and this vengeful God came down when we made this mistake and said, out, you can't stay here anymore. You're out on your own. You got to make it by yourselves. And of course, I'm female, so it was all my fault, you know? So what kind of comfort does that creation story give me at this point in my career, in my life, in my spiritual? Ugh, what a terrible creation story to have. How much nicer to have the creation story that Gilbert had of this wonderful birthing of his people through the navel of the earth and being cared for and on a journey to be with his people, and his ancestors are there and he's there and they're all together and we're all one. I mean, what a wonderful story to have. So I highly recommend that everybody stop and think about, what creation story are you carrying around in your head? And if it isn't one that helps connect you to others and connect you to the world and reinforces our sense of oneness, throw it out and get a different one. You can imagine your own creation story if you want to. But yeah, think about that, because it has a huge impact on how you think about who you are. I am this little waif wandering through the world all by myself with a vengeful God who's thrown me out of the Garden of Eden, and it's all my fault. Oh, you know, where does that take you? Yeah. So get a new creation story if you can. That's my imagination for ourselves advice. So what about the stories we tell ourselves about others? I want to harken back to what Mike told us as a story. He asked us to envision a caveman with his face all scrunched up and, you know, with a club over his hand, the stereotypical Neanderthal, you know. And of course, we all have that image in our heads. And actually, as that they've discovered, Neanderthals actually are very gentle, very nice, intelligent people. But for the moment, we're the Neanderthal here. And we think, oh yeah, there's that, you know, brutish Neanderthal person. Huh. And then you get a bigger picture and you realize, oh, but there's a saber-toothed tiger right in front of him. So, you know, he's getting all up like this because he's got to do something with that saber-toothed tiger. And then you back up a little more and you see, oh, and there's a mate and some children behind him. So he's also engaged in all of this to protect the people he loves. Your perception of what that angry face means changes as you get a bigger picture of what's really going on. Well, I've got a little exercise I'd like us to go through. This comes from a group called Braver Angels. And it has to do with the depolarizing political divisions. So I'm going to read a series of statements. And again, this is just a way of just getting us all to stop and think for a moment. And it doesn't make any difference where you are when I read the options of where you might fall. Just notice what your reaction is and think about how you do these things. So my first question, how often do I find myself thinking about those people on the other political side without much regard for the variation among them? And your choices are often, sometimes, or never. Often, sometimes, or never. How often do I find myself assigning mainly self-serving or negative motives to the other group and mainly positive motives to my group? Often, sometimes, never. How often do I find myself focusing on the most extreme or outrageous ideas and people on the other side, thereby making it hard to see how a reasonable person could remain in that group? Often, sometimes, never. How often do I find myself comparing the worst people on the other side with the best people on my side? Often, sometimes, never. How often do I feel a rush of pleasure with friends when we ridicule those crazies on the other political side? Often, sometimes, never. And which of the following is closest to my overall emotional attitude toward the majority of people who support the other side? They are enemies out to destroy the country. They are ignorant and should know better. They are well-meaning but duped. They make contributions, even if they are mostly off base. They make unique and necessary contributions. That list goes from hate, disdain, pity, basic respect, to respect and appreciation. So I just wanted to throw those out there just as an opportunity to get us thinking a little bit about what is it that we are telling ourselves? What stories do we carry about those people? All of those things help us to dehumanize them. And when they're dehumanized, we don't have to treat them as humans anymore. But the fact of the matter is, if we could sit down and talk with another person, we would discover that they too have their saber-toothed tigers, and they too have what it is that they're trying to protect. Well, let's talk about stories about the world for a moment. There's a writer that was a Catholic priest and also a scientist. He was French, and his name is one I've always had trouble pronouncing, but I will attempt it. Maybe you'll recognize it through my very bad pronunciation. His name is Teilhard du Chardon. Thank you. I don't know how to do that. So every time I need to mention his name, I'll point to you and you can say it for me. Thank you. Okay. So he had a vision, an imagination, a way of envisioning who we are and what we're doing here and where we came from in terms of our planet and this world. He envisioned this amazing amount of creative energy being injected into this ball of stuff here floating in the universe, and then helping transform to go through several ages. The first age was the material age, which was when we had volcanoes and rocks and all that stuff getting formed. The second was the biological age, when we started to see life come to being on this planet, and trees and dinosaurs, and then on to other kinds of animals. And the third age is the age of consciousness, started about 300, 400,000 years ago, when humans began to be conscious. His imagination of this is that there's this creative, wonderful energy, and how it is reaching outward, outpouring from this wonderful source that we have on this planet. And now it's outpouring through us, that we are the energy that it is evolving the consciousness of this world. And the unfolding of the energy of this world is the combined consciousness of all of us. And again, that can be good or it can be destructive. So he has 6 suggestions, a 6-step process for how to help guide us to using this immense creative energy that we have to evolve the world in the direction of the sacred. These are going to sound somewhat familiar because this is unity. So his first suggestion to start with is go to the silence within. Resonate with the love and the divine oneness that is within. His second then step, be playful, lighthearted, fun. Get inspired from playful imaginings. His third step then, stay in a place of gratitude. Everything is unfolding for us, not against us, even if things appear to be difficult and not easy. The fourth step, visualize what you want for yourself, for your community, for the planet. Visualize that from an expansive sense of what is possible. Fifth step, ask yourself, is this vision one that is of service to others and to the planet? And once you've run through all those steps, you're ready to take the last step, which is step number 6. Affirm that vision and put your heart energy into it. That is a process for us to use our imaginations to be the transformative presence of consciousness on this planet. Because we are the energy that will take the world to that next level of spiritual consciousness. So Louise asked us, Louise again mentioned to us that imagination is an act of spirit. And so I invite you to imagine better and to use those 6 steps to imagine better for yourself, for others, and for the world. And again, just to review what they are, go to the silence within, be playful and lighthearted, stay in a place of gratitude, visualize what you want, ask if it is in fact for the betterment of others as well as yourselves and for the betterment of the world. And then affirm that vision and put your heart energy into it. So let's just take a few moments now to do our meditation, to go to that quiet place inside. I invite you all to get comfortable. Allow yourself to just rest for a moment in that inner place of peace. Rest in that inner place where we connect with the I am divine presence within. I am. This is the name of the divine presence within me. Sometimes I may forget my divine identity by thinking of myself as weak or incapable or unfortunate. If I have told disempowering stories to myself about myself, I release those stories now. Each time I say, I am, I strengthen my awareness of the truth of my being. I am God's light, life, love, wisdom, and strength, expressing uniquely as me. As I pay attention to my thoughts and words, I am able to recognize and release limiting thoughts more quickly. My awareness of my true identity grows stronger and stronger. I have a powerful imagination, but sometimes I misuse it by picturing what may go wrong and imagining outcomes I do not want. When I feel worried or fearful, I imagine the protecting presence of God surrounding me. I imagine my worldly concerns resolving peacefully. And as I do, I feel calm and safe. Freed from my constricting feelings, I'm newly empowered and confident as my fearful thoughts begin to fade. I am now bold and brave, carrying the presence of God with me always. I use my imagination wisely. I expect the best, trusting that I cannot be outside of God's protecting presence. With God's presence within, I imagine better. Thank you, Spirit, for the creative presence of imagination within me. Amen.
Amen.
So here we are, back in the room, back with each other. Time to do our prayer of protection and then our peace song. And again, let's let these words that we're about to say fill our imaginations. The light of God surrounds us. We are the light. The love of God enfolds us. We are the love. The power of God protects us. We are the power. The presence of God watches over us. We are the presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. We are one. Okay, let's form our circle.